if you suspect, as I do, that what we're in the midst of now is a largely manufactured, contrived crisis, and I'm not going to go into the details about why I feel that way or why I conclude that. I talk about that in some other recent videos, but I don't want to go over territory that I've already traversed. Then I think it's important to keep an eye out on what's being floated out there, even in the mainstream media, as kind of what could be thought of as trial balloons. And I found out about this Newsweek article that I'm about to read a couple of excerpts from. I found out about it from watching the Dark Journalist YouTube channel, which I would recommend. And I'll give the link to the video where he discusses this article along with many other things. The thing about the Dark Journalist channel and the videos that he records is that they're mostly on the lengthy side, which is good. It's fine. You know, he's a knowledgeable person who has a lot of interesting ideas to impart. But I think it's important to get this out there in a way that's it's a little punchier. It's kind of funny to think of myself that way, because I know a lot of you see me as long-winded and taking too long to say anything. But this video is going to be only 10 or 15 minutes long, if that. So I'm going to just cover what's in this article, because some really wild and crazy stuff is discussed here. And in Dark Journalist's video, he talks about it as a trial balloon. This is one of those things where they float it out there and see how people react to it. And of course, the mainstream media, much of it is, Mockingbird, much of it is CIA owned, or at least, heavily influenced by CIA or other similar sources, so that you don't get the full truth, the full picture. You only get what they want you to get. And so with that in mind, it's even more significant that they would put something like this out. Okay, now, and I'll also link to this article, so you can read it in full. Not that I really want to give Newsweek any hits, but in a extraordinary event like this, I think it's okay to give them some traffic, just because what is discussed in this article is just so. So okay, let me begin, and I'll just excerpt. It's a lengthy article. I'm just going to read some excerpts from it. Even as President Trump says he tested negative for coronavirus. I'm sorry. Right there from the start, you can see how dishonest these people are. If it was, and I don't want to make this into a partisan thing, because I don't really care about partisan stuff, but you know that if President Obama, if Obama were president and he had said that he tested negative for coronavirus, they wouldn't say that he says he tested negative. They would say President Obama tested negative for coronavirus. But with Trump, they say, even as President Trump says he tested negative for coronavirus. Just such a snotty way to begin. And it shows how dishonest they are. But that's not the main point. It's just something that stands out to me right now. Even as he says he tested negative for coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic raises the fear that large swaths of the executive branch, or even Congress and the Supreme Court, could also be disabled, forcing the implementation of continuity of government plans that include evacuating Washington and devolving leadership to second-tier officials in remote and quarantined locations. Again, such a dramatic picture that they're drawing, but then that's all that they've done, is draw the most dramatic, most apocalyptic sounding scenarios for us. That's all they've done ever since this virus came on the scene. There's never been any effort to say, well, okay, this is the worst case scenario, but if we take precautions, this will be we can surely avoid this or that or the other thing, nor is there any real effort to be honest about things like the lethality rate of the virus, which is quite low, as I've said many, many times. But here they talk about, oh, well, we're considering the idea of Washington being disabled because so many lawmakers and Supreme Court members and high mucky mucks are just keeling over left and right, and that leadership must be devolved to second-tier officials in remote and quarantine locations. Blah, blah, blah. Above top secret contingency plans already exist for what the military is supposed to do if all constitutional successors are incapacitated. Right, there is a line, what do they call it? A line of succession. If the president gets taken out, the vice president is in charge. If the vice president gets taken out, the Speaker of the House is in charge. And there it goes on and on down the line. But I don't know, for some reason, that's not operational anymore. Standby orders were issued more than 3 weeks ago to ready these plans, the plans for constitutional successors. If all the constitutional successors are incapacitated. What, I mean, I thought it's supposed to be, okay, if they're dead, but if they're incapacitated, what does that mean? There's so much gunk in this prose. But again, this is being put out there for us to read, for us to, as a kind of, what dark journalist calls a trial balloon, and I think I feel that it is that. Okay. Standby orders were issued more than 3 weeks ago to ready these plans, not just to protect Washington, but also to prepare for the possibility of some form of martial law. Oh, goody. Martial law again. Don't you love to hear that? So there are various plans, codenamed Octagon, Freejack, and Zodiac. They are so secret that under these extraordinary plans, they're so secret that they're being discussed in this Newsweek article. How does that compute? Devolution could circumvent the normal constitutional provisions for government succession, and military commanders could be placed in control around America. Now, highlight that. If you print off this article, as I have, highlight that sentence. Military commanders could be placed in control around America. WTF. How are they steering us to this? Right? Or are they really steering us? Is this just being put out there to see if people are going to be angry or upset about this idea, and then maybe they'll back off? Well, so much of this is a shit test. So much of this is, I believe, so much of this is, let's see how much we can get away with before we get pushback. Let's see what we can tell people to do, and say, we are the authorities. We know what's best for you. How much of that can they do before, again, people say hell no? And they've got their plans: Octagon, Freejack, and Zodiac. So badass. Okay. So military commanders could be placed in control around America. The whole line of succession that's there, that could just be thrown out the window, and we could be under military occupation, essentially. That's what it's saying here. Out of necessity, supposedly. We're in new territory, says one senior officer. The entire post-9/11 paradigm of emergency planning thrown out the window. Same metaphor I used a moment ago. The officer jokes, in a kind of morbid humor characteristic of this slow-moving disaster, that America had better learn who General Terence J. O'Shaughnessy is. General Terence J. O'Shaughnessy. That's the name that they float out there, okay? That's got to be significant. And Dark Journalist talks more about this O'Shaughnessy character, who he is. But I wanted to highlight that here. He, that is O'Shaughnessy, is the combatant commander, quote unquote. That's what they have the quotes here in the article. For the United States, the combatant commander for the United States, and would in theory be in charge if Washington were eviscerated. That is, until a new civilian leader could be installed. Well, yeah, of course. Of course they would restore the Constitution as soon as possible after wresting it away and launching this coup d'etat and putting this military combatant commander in control. So that's all I'm going to talk about from this article, but you can read it yourself, and I invite you to listen to Dark Journalist talk about this entire this article and all the issues surrounding it, because this is really amazing stuff that it's being put out there. You'd think that if this was so top secret, and it was really, it was something that was being done in the interests of national well-being, but that people wouldn't, if people heard it, they would panic, or they would get incensed at the idea of the Constitution being absolutely shredded. But no, they're putting it out there. It's being put out there right in front of us in this article. And other than Dark Journalist, I haven't heard anyone talk about this article. Again, just to repeat a couple of things. It's possible that under these extraordinary plans, devolution, quote unquote, could circumvent the normal constitutional provisions for governmental succession, and military commanders could be placed in control around America. And this unnamed officer, jokes that America had better learn who General Terrence J. O'Shaughnessy is. And what they say about him here is that he is the combatant commander of the United States, whatever the hell that is, combatant commander for the United States. He's a 4-star general. And again, Dark Journalist talks a lot more about him. But he's the name that's put out in this article. So over the course of the last, 2-3 weeks, we've gotten to this point where the hype and the panic is being notched up to 11, and things have gotten so crazy because they've made them crazy. They've done their best to freak everybody out, and now to the point where they're talking about, well, maybe we just need to suspend the Constitution and suspend representative government, and put America under military command, and have our new dear leader, I guess, be this General Terrence J. O'Shaughnessy. So I wanted to just put all this information out there in front of you, because I think it's an important thing to highlight, and it's kind of a mystery to me why this isn't being more widely discussed. But then again, I'm not. Maybe it is, and I'm just not aware of it, because I'm in some ways trying to avoid the news these days, because you've got to avoid this mind virus that they're trying to infect you with their relentless fear-mongering and panic. But this is information that it's very useful to have. So I encourage you to read this article. Of course, read it. Take everything in it with many grains of salt, because this is Newsweek magazine. It's the mainstream media. It's the Lugenpress. They're liars. They're manipulators. They're pretty useless, I think, for the most part. But also, I encourage you to watch the Dark Journalist video on this, which I will also link. So that's it. Maybe there'll be more to say at a later time. But my name's Andy Nowicki. You can check out my work at altrightnovelist.com or lowstatusnovelist.blogspot.com. Thank you for watching.